you are interested in the kind of holistic wellness that incorporates your mind, body, and spirit, you're going to love this conversation between myself and Hannah Levin. We talk about Ayurveda and the superpower of the different energetics of this ancient health system. Hi, everyone. I am here today with Hannah Levin, and I'm really excited to share a conversation that I think is going to really inspire you and share Hannah's wisdom about Ayurveda and her health coaching. So, hi, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Can you give us a little bit of information just about your background and your credentials and kind of how you came into this work?
Yes. So my background really started with having chronic sinus infections when I was a teenager. and um, Being from an artistic and holistic family that really saw food as medicine, and ultimately, though, going on round after round of antibiotics, which ended up leading me to gut disruption. And meanwhile, I went on an artistic path and have a background as a studio potter, and I was an art teacher for 11 years. But all along the way, I was studying yoga and health and nutrition. And it really all culminated, like I was a yoga teacher for, I don't know, probably 10 years or something. And then I had a health crisis. And that health crisis was kind of like, I think many of us at some point kind of get hit in the face with a brick of life, we could say, like, like something needs to change here. And that was kind of my moment of being like, oh, am I going to go down this? I was told that if I didn't have surgery, that I was going to die of cancer. And so that was like a very scary thing to be told by a doctor. And it really was like this reckoning for me that made me realize, like, oh, I actually believe that bodies can heal if given the right conditions. And it's my job to provide my body with the conditions that it can heal in. And that led me to go on this whole healing journey. I did not have surgery. I ended up healing this condition in its entirety. And then just getting really feisty about, like, all of us need to know that we aren't stuck, that we can really heal. And that put me on the path to Ayurveda, which is really about living in alignment with the natural world. And it's still so applicable today, even though it's over 5,000 years old. So, like, now I have all these credentials. I have a master's degree in education, which I got prior. I'm an advanced experienced yoga teacher. I'm a continuing education provider with yoga. And then I also am an Ayurveda health counselor, and hopefully will be graduating in April as an Ayurveda practitioner.
That's wonderful. So many good, rich offerings for people. And I could not love more your perspective that we are accountable for our own health and wellness. And the body has strange things that happen to it because we're human and because we're vulnerable to certain physical, mental, spiritual ailments, and we are not victim to them. So I really appreciate your perspective that you get fired up about this and about teaching other people that they can claim accountability for their own health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to point out that it's not a shame and blame situation. Like, we don't need to go like, oh, I'm such an awful person because X, Y, and Z is my reality right now. I really see it as planting the seeds of curiosity. So, do we can we just be like, oh, I'm curious, like what led to this? Like, once I learned more about how my constitution functions, I was able to see like how I ended up in with the diagnosis that I had. And then knowing that I can make different decisions moving forward. And now I'm 44 and I'm like the happiest and healthiest I've ever been in my entire life. And I just wish that more people could experience, like, that's my goal, is more and more people can experience that aging is actually a really lovely process. Like, to feel better in my 40s than I did in my 20s is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I really love that you're coming at this from the perspective of walking your talk and
Yeah.
going through this yourself, doing this consistently as a practice in your life. And from that point, you can model both personally and professionally something that has worked for you and something that has thousands of years of backstory.
Right.
So for the people who are watching who are like, Aru, what? What are we talking about? Can you give us a little background into Ayurveda and the doshas and just kind of connect us to this traditional health model?
Yes. So we'll give you the few-minute introduction to Ayurveda. So Ayurveda originated in India over 5,000 years ago. And so one thing I like to point out there is that things that don't work don't stick around. We see this all the time, like in the tech industry and our modern world. You'd be like, oh, that's a cool invention. But if it doesn't work, if it doesn't serve people, it doesn't stick around. So Ayurveda even was like sent underground by um, English rule, in India, and it still persisted because it works. And it's the word Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word. Ayur means life, and Veda means knowledge or wisdom. So when we look at that word, we know that it is the knowledge of life or the wisdom of life, which if somebody said, "Hey, do you want to know the knowledge of life?" Wouldn't you be like, "Yes, please." Like,
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure this out for so long. So the cool thing is Ayurveda is based in 5 elements, and those elements are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And everything is made up of those 5 elements in different ways and different amounts. Anything from our body constitution to weather patterns to foods to emotions, you name it. We can look at it from its elemental qualities. And what's really cool is that Ayurveda further simplifies things into doshas, which you mentioned before. And so we could say doshas are energies or constitutions. And those 3 doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Vata is, each of them is made up of 2 elements. So Vata is made up of space and air, Pitta is made up of fire and water, and Kapha is made up of earth and water. And all of us are comprised of all 3, but in different amounts. So we have like unique recipes that create our unique universe. And yet, we still are in the conversation with these 5 elements all the time. So, this is coming into more and more popularity in the West. And people are beginning to say things like, well, I'm a Vata. What are you? Or, you know, and we need to really be thoughtful about how we talk about this. And it's totally fine if people kind of identify in that way. I like to say something like, I'm Vata predominant, right? And so all of us, so I have a dosha quiz on my website if your viewers are interested in kind of finding out their predominant dosha is what that quiz tells you. And then it gives you some tips about how to live well with that predominance. Of course, sometimes we can kind of see ourselves in ways that aren't necessarily accurate. So it can be helpful to work with somebody who practices Ayurveda and really kind of get down to the bottom of what our experience is and how we live in balance. So there's 2 ways to understand our constitutions. One is called Prakriti, which is your innate constitution. It's established when you're conceived. So it has a lot to do with your parents and their states when you were conceived. And we can think of that a little bit more like DNA. Like it's kind of like our programming, but we can also think of it as our unique formula for where we're the healthiest and happiest. And then we have what's called Vikriti, which is where we get out of balance. So as we live our lives, things happen. We unknowingly often make choices that lead to us not being in balance. And so that's Vikriti. So often what we're working with is Vikriti, and there can be some confusion. Like if Vikriti comes in really early in our lives, we can think that that's our Prakriti.
Mm.
So it can be a little complex, and again, that's when it's nice to work with somebody who does this professionally, and then you can learn a little bit more about how to bring your body back into balance, your body, mind, and spirit. I mean, it really is not just body, but most people come to Ayurveda because of something happening in their bodies that they want to fix or change. Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody came to you feeling like there was something funky in their body or their mind or their spirit or their holistic system, what are some of the methodologies that you would use to help them regain balance? I know food is a
Mm-hmm.
huge element of Ayurveda and herbs, but what are some of, can you kind of speak to the different trajectories that you would take in treatment for someone?
Yeah, so you mentioned two of the three of the primary modalities that we use when working with somebody with Ayurveda, and those are food, and then lifestyle and herbs.
Mhm.
So when we say food, I want to be clear that I living an Ayurvedic life or in an Ayurvedic way isn't a diet, it's a system of eating. So you can't just say like I'm on an Ayurvedic diet, right? Because that will mean different things to different people. Because everything can be medicine and everything can be poison. It just depends on who we're talking about. So the three questions that we're always asking in Ayurveda is for who, when, and how much. So something can be, like I said, a medicine for one person, poison for somebody else. So that's for who. And then when is like what time of year or what time of day or what life stage are you doing this in? Are you eating this or, whatever it is? And then how much? Some things can be really helpful in small quantities, but if we do too much, it sends us further into imbalance. So we have to find the correct amount for each individual.
I love that because we're all so different. And I think
Yeah.
it's really common in the West that people kind of want the easy button and the one size fits all health model that's going to make all their dreams come true. But I think it's really important that we remember that that's fallacy and that we're all cellularly so different. And then you throw in trauma and mental health and physical stuff and environmental stuff and relational stuff. And there's a lot of layers. And
Yes.
maybe can you speak to that just for a moment about the the intersection of Ayurveda with mental health and mental wellness?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we can work with Ayurveda in the mind. So we're still working with the doshas. And there's kind of general tendencies for each dosha when it's out of balance. So, like if Vata is out of balance, there's a tendency towards anxiety and overwhelm. When Pitta is out of balance, there's a tendency towards perfectionism, control, and anger. And then when kapha is out of balance, there's a tendency towards lethargy, stagnation, and depression. And so that's very simplified, but just to give you a picture, we can see the doshic, how these doshas play out in the mind. And so we wouldn't just say like, oh, if you're having like a lot of hot temper feelings, like eat a lot of cucumbers, like that wouldn't necessarily be like the cure, right? But we would look at like how are, well, I would say too, one part of both yoga and Ayurveda is this idea of dharma, of living your purpose. Like, why are you here? There's really the understanding of like, none of us are an accident. There's no like, we're just here to party, kind of like, right? Like, we're all here for a reason. And if we really live into that awareness, what we experience is more alignment. So when we have imbalance in the mental space, it's often because we're out of alignment with our true nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's body, mind, or spirit, or all three.
Right. So I think I wonder for the audience if you can just kind of give maybe some of the top indications of imbalance that people might experience in their mind, body, spirit. How does imbalance walk through your door and show
Yeah.
itself to you?
Well, yes, it can be lots of different ways. I would say, if people want to self-identify, like, do I have an imbalance? It's anything that you are not happy with, right? So it might be something like I'm not sleeping well, or I can't gain weight or lose weight, or I, my digestive system, a lot is Ayurveda really sees the seat of health as being in the digestive tract, which Western medicine is just discovering now, which is pretty ironic. Um, and so we bring everything back to digestive health. So we might think that it's normal to only have a bowel movement, once a week or something, but actually we need to be having at least one a day. That looks different per dosha too, but that we're looking at like what if a fairy came along and said, what would you like to change about how you feel? And you might say, oh wow, I can have, like, you could change things, because a lot of us think that we're just living with, like, we're stuck, that it's our lot to be, for me it was, chronic allergies, chronic sinus infections, gut disruption that led to chronic constipation, and then led to inflammation in my body, weight gain, I almost had hip surgery at one point, like, and then anxiety and depression, and it just like snowballs. But at the time of all of these things, I was just like, oh, this is just how I am. So, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves about this is just how I am? That if we could, take that fairy up on her offer, that we would be like, I would like to not be this way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we could say is an imbalance. So there's kind of general imbalances that show up for each dosha. Would you like me to go into some of those?
Sure. Yeah. And
Okay.
maybe can you counter it? We've titled this talk The Superpower of the
Superpowers.
Dosha.
Yeah.
So maybe could you give like some of the superpowers of each dosha and some of the ways that imbalance shows up so that we have contrast?
Yes, that's a great way to frame this. Yes. So yes, let's look at superpowers first. So, and I'm going to go through in this order: Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and that I'm not doing this because like Vata is better than Kapha or something like that. But in Ayurveda, we address dosha in this order because Vata is the most changeable and quick moving, and Pitta is kind of like in the middle, and then Kapha is the most stable. And so everything's kind of looked at in that order. So just want to put that out there too. It's not a hierarchy. Okay. So Vata's superpowers are that, so the general qualities for Vata are dry, light, cold, mobile, subtle, and rough. And so Vata has this kind of wind energy that we could, so the elements are air and space, as I mentioned before. And so Vada's superpowers are creativity and out of the box thinking and spontaneity, love of adventure and trying new things. So Vada is really here to help us be creative, to grow and expand. So the principle of space is the principle of expansion, and then air is this principle of movement. So we can think of the wind. So these are really great qualities that can be very helpful for us. And when Vata gets out of balance, these qualities can show up in terms of, so I mentioned anxiety and overwhelm, where we're kind of like up in the ether, just like spinning around, and we're like, where's the ground? Where's the structure? Right? So we can do really well to bring in structure, which Vata doesn't tend to like so much. They want to be totally spontaneous and do whatever they want, whenever they want. But the structure of just like a daily schedule can be really, really helpful for Vata. There can also be a tendency towards dryness and rough qualities in the body. So that can show up like dry eyes, dry skin, constipation, dryness in the digestive tract. So we bring in beneficial fats and oiling of the body and things like that. And so like those are just some examples, but there's always the balance. There's always the, like, you balance with the wisdom of opposites. If something's too light, you bring, help it be heavy. One thing that's really helpful for Vata is some actual weight, like weighted blankets have become very, very popular. And it's because we live in a Vata deranged culture. And so if we even don't have Vata as our predominant dosha, it could still be a Vikriti, how we're out of balance. And so having like physical weight on the body can feel really grounding, like literally
Yeah.
like that courage to exhale, just be like, oh, grounding. So
Mm.
that's really, really nice. And then we'll move on to Pitta. I could talk about all of these things for multiple days, but so Pitta is bright, light, sharp, and spreading. And fire and water are the elements here. And so the superpowers of Pitta are that they can be very organized and passionate. They can really get things taken care of. That's the like doer energy. And they're very helpful in setting up systems so that other things can function more smoothly. And and being in a leadership position can often be a superpower of Pitta. And so Pitta can show up out of balance, as I mentioned before, kind of towards the fiery emotions, and jealousy can be in there as well. And so the balance there is actually fun, that pittas can get a little too like focused on achieving and
Yeah.
checking off the boxes. And it's nice to just be like, you're doing this just to have fun. Like there's no other purpose, just fun. That's good for pitta. And then in the body, things that can show up are often heat related. So any sort of inflammation, we have this as a chronic issue in our modern world too. Um, so inflammation, any like skin issues, rashes, heat things. Also in the digestive tract, this shows up as acid reflux or loose stool, diarrhea.
Mhm.
And so we want to bring in cooling things. So I did mention cucumbers earlier. They are a cooling food, and they can be helpful when in season. But then also we can work with other cooling foods and food preps, as well as um, lifestyle things like not exercising in the hot part of the day, not doing things that aggravate heat like sweats or saunas or hot yoga. Most of the people doing hot yoga are pitta predominant. It's kind of ironic. Um, and so and then herbs too. We can give herbs. So then let's look at kapha. So kapha is earth and water, and kapha, as I mentioned before, can tend towards depression or lethargy, kind of stagnation. And so the balance there is to get moving. And the first way to get moving is physically. So go for a walk, go for a run, go jump on a trampoline, whatever it is, but get energy moving in your body. And then kapha issues in the body tend to be ones of stagnation or growth. So weight gain, as well as any sort of other growths like lipomas, any sort of mucousy condition. So when you have like sinus stuff, or there can even be mucus in the stool. And brain fog is another kapha condition. And so again, we want to warm things up. Oh, I didn't tell you the qualities. The qualities for kapha are cool, cloudy, static, heavy, and soft. And so so we want to warm things up and get things moving, basically, for kapha.
And
So
I don't think I heard the
oh,
superpowers of
superpowers for kapha. Yes, we
yeah.
need the superpowers of kapha. Oh my goodness, thank you. Superpowers of kapha are being gentle, loving, and loyal. The earth and water elements are cohesive, like they come together and make mud, right? Which, like, if you think of fire and water from pitta, those are antagonistic
Mhm.
quality right elements, but with Kapha, they like can combine and it makes this cohesive end product. And that is, it's all about like bringing things together. So
Mm.
Kapha is like, Kapha personalities are very like, they're the huggers and the grandmothers. They're
Yeah.
the peacekeepers and the people that help find the commonalities within a group or any situation. Um, and yeah, so they're really like the cohesive, sweet, loving,
The
like,
nurturers.
yes, the nurturers. And we need more Kapha energy in our world.
Yeah, I'm thinking that to myself that our culture is so fast paced,
Yes,
and it's like it's so binary in so many ways, right? Like people are either on the rat race or they're like on the couch depressed, right?
right.
Numbing out. And so I feel like, that's an imbalance in a two part, but the three part of the doshas is really kind of an interesting balancing system because it adds one more piece that's not so black and white.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about astrology, that uses, because I'm an Aries. And so I always
Me
identify as
too.
like, you are, yay. So I always identify as a fire goddess for sure. Like that's in me. And I also identify as predominantly Pitta, I think.
Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering, like, are those two in some way related or is that coincidental? And does it have to do with archetypes? Right. And my mind is even going to like Myers-Briggs, and are we,
Yeah.
introvert, extrovert, sensing, perceiving, like all these different systems. It feels like Ayurveda has a framework that can hold them all.
Yes, it does. And I have found it very fascinating. Yes, Myers-Briggs, yes, Enneagram, yes, all of these things. Astrology is a little bit different in that there is a whole kind of world of Vedic astrology, which is called Jyotish, which is different from Western astrology. So, like, we can say, like, I'm an Aries, that's our sun sign. In Jyotish, there's a sun sign, but it's not your predominant sign. Like, it's not what governs you in the way that Western astrology sees the sun sign as governing you. Um, and so it is really interesting to look at all of these things. I'm Vata predominant, but I'm in Aries, but I have a high secondary Pitta. So when I look at those things specifically in terms of personality, it's like I have the creativity of the Vata, but I also have the structure and the passion and the like see it through of the Pitta to kind of like put my visions into practice, that
Right.
the Vata dreams, right? And also kind of keep the Vata in check. I have a million ideas every single day, but the Pitta can kind of be like, and here's where parts work comes in too, right? Where we look at internal family systems, like it can be like the Pitta part of me is saying like really choose where you're putting your energy, right? Because we can burn out.
Mhm.
And we're also in Pitta stage of life. You and I are right now. So this is like adulthood basically until menopause is the pitta stage of life. And so this is a time when we're like building and creating, we're on fire. But what happens to a lot of people during this time is they burn out. They
Mhm.
literally go past what their reserves and capabilities are, and that pushes them. I mean, we have autoimmune diseases have just blown up, right? This is the body attacking itself because we can't take care of ourselves, right? Like the body is just saying like enough already, enough already, enough now enough, right? It's
Right.
like
It's like too much
we're
imbalance.
going to self-destruct, right? And this pitta stage of life is like we're so rewarded in our culture for going. Then we have the vata imbalance of multitasking and being ungrounded and lack of structure for ourselves,
Yeah.
that we're not tuning into that kapha. We end up in a kapha place. Our bodies will put us in
Mm.
kapha timeout. You know, it's like you think you are invincible and you can go. Sorry, you're gonna, be on the couch for 5 months or something, right? It's like
Yeah.
we need that balance of downtime. And Ayurveda is all about the wisdom of opposites And so, even with the seasons, like we aren't meant to live the same year round in terms of our energy output, or even in a lunar cycle. We start bringing this around even into a day. There's doshic energies that govern times, seasons, life stages. And when we understand those, we can really tune into how we get to live into our superpowers
Mm-hmm.
without burning out, without blowing up, right?
Right. So be in our superpower without imbalance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so interesting that we're in the Pitta life stage right
Mm-hmm.
now. Um, a lot of my audience knows that I recently came back from a sabbatical because
Mm-hmm.
I got really burned out from my therapy practice and I took 5 months off. And it was really interesting because it felt like what I really needed was that Kapha, like get into bed with Netflix for 5 months
Mm-hmm.
thing. But what ended up happening is that I think once I did enough resting, and it wasn't always passive rest like lying down. Some of
Yeah.
it was being out in nature and walking and being intentional with the time I spent with my family. And when I felt that, it was a very perceptible shift in my body. I felt like that pitta energy came back in where it was like, okay, so now what are we going to create for when you come back from sabbatical that's going to feel sustainable and balanced? And it felt really different than that hard driving, working, forcing, because it was generative. And
Yes.
that energy is like that fire energy with a really flowing channel. And
Yes.
when you say it's like fire and water, that's really how it feels to be in that generative pitta state.
Yes. I love that you just shared that. I want to add on a little piece of Ayurvedic teaching to what you just shared, which is that there's this concept of what we call ojas, or essential vitality sap. And you can think of that as like your inner well of abundance. And most people are walking around and living their lives with a depleted well of abundance. Like there's nothing in the well,
Oh,
right? But when you can fill your own inner well, which is the time that you took, you said, stop, I'm pressing reset. You rebuilt your ojas. And then from that place, you can come back to, oh, I am so inspired. I do love this, but it has to also work for me. Right. So that's like the question. And, I'm a fellow entrepreneur, and building a business has been a huge part of my journey in the past decade. And at the same time, it is coming back to like having this knowledge of Ayurveda, coming back to again and again and again, like, okay, I can do these things that serve, and it needs to be a both and does it work for me,
right.
right? Is it feeding my ojas? And
Yes.
when it doesn't, maybe it's a short little thing that it's like, okay, I'll do this one thing, whatever. But in general, it needs to be that both and, so that it is sustainable. But too many people are not having that inner dialogue of,
Right. Yeah, and
you know,
this is all about authentic living
yeah,
and living with integrity for the body that you're in, the system that is your being, and
yeah,
it's different for all of us. And so I feel like that's so spot on.
yes,
So I feel like we could just talk forever.
yes.
I like our conversation so much. And maybe if people request a second part, we can record more. But for today, I have one last question that I kind of want to ask you about. This is an ancient healing system, and we are in this modern world. How do we do this in our fast-paced lives and juggling all the balls and wearing all the hats that we all feel like we need to do? Can you give us maybe like 3 to 5 recommendations or suggestions that we could do, maybe cross doshic, whoever we are and however we live, that can just help us just step a little bit more into balance?
Sure. Yeah, so if we're just looking at aligning with the rhythms of nature, like I've mentioned that, but I haven't given real specific um, guidelines around that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like all doshas, all people. can do really well. So, a couple of things that I would recommend is to try to wake up before the sunrise each day. So, this is really powerful in terms of your perspective and your physiology, that your energy builds with the solar energy. So, if you can wake up and witness the sunrise, it's like the dawning of a new energy each day for you. And this is really powerful because it um, sets you up for a very different day. It's that Vata time in the morning when you first wake up that is like it connects you with something greater while also connecting you to well, it's like a more expansive vision for your life can happen then. So that's really powerful. And I really encourage people to do that, gradually over time if you're getting up later, like little by little, but to do that every day, like not
Your
just every once in a
energy,
while.
your energy can kind of build with the sun and
Exactly.
then fall with the sun. I love
Yep.
that. And that
Yes.
seems like an easy shift that people can make because it's really concrete.
Yes. Yes. And it changes throughout the year because in the winter we have more darkness and we need more sleep. Ha! You
Yeah.
can still get up before the sunrise and get more sleep. So at the other end of the day, we want to go to bed by 10 p.m. Before 10 p.m. is Kapha time, and that helps us like sink down into that nurturing, soft, sweet energy of sleep. After 10 p.m. is Pitta time, so your cellular intelligence lights back up and says, oh, we need to do projects, and you get hungry again, and all sorts of things happen. If you're asleep before 10 p.m., that cellular intelligence lights up, but you're asleep, and that's when your body cleans house. So it's really, really important. This is another thing for autoimmune issues and really any kind of imbalance is like be asleep before 10 p.m. or else you're setting yourself up for some major vikriti. And then the third thing that I would encourage people to do is to not snack and to allow at least 3 to 4 hours in between food intake. So we have this principle of just like there's night and day and summer, and it's this summer and winter, this principle of expansion and contraction. It's called spanda. We need it to function and to be healthy, happy people. Like we need to be awake, we need to be asleep, right? We need to be born, we need to die. Like all these things that we don't have a say. That's just how it is. Okay. And same is true in our digestive tract. We need to receive food, nourishing food, ideally, nourishing, seasonal, organic food, and then fully digest it. It takes 3 to 4 hours for that to move out of your stomach. Allow yourself a little space. Space. So helpful. And then have another meal. So that practice can do wonders for anxiety, for insomnia, and we also don't want to eat within 3 hours of going to bed. So we want to have food fully digested so that we can just sleep. We're not trying to digest while we're sleeping. So
Love
I
it.
ended up giving you 4 tips. There you go.
Great. I love all of them. I think that gives people a really applicable place to access this and to start out. Um, Thank you for being here with us. For people who are just loving your vibe, where can people find you? What are you up to? What kind of offerings do you have going on right now?
Yeah, thanks. So, along the lines of what I was just saying about kind of shifting um, your habits, I run a year-long program. So I specialize in women's health, and I run a year-long program called the Vitality Circle that is focused on living in seasonal alignment and getting these habits on track, as well as so it's a group program, but also includes one-on-one coaching where I really help people dial in to heal from their own vikriti. So get back on track, the track of ease. So the Vitality Circle opens up 4 times a year at the beginning of each season. So we'll be opening up again at the beginning of November. I have 4 seasonal challenges I run each year. They're a week-long free that are really fun to just kind of dip your toe into Ayurveda. And those are hosted on Facebook and Zoom. And then I run detoxes twice a year. We're actually in the middle of the autumn detox right now. Those are really fun. You can join from anywhere. And a seasonal reset is really what it is, a digestive reset. So we do that in the spring and the fall, the joints and the seasons. Again, it's important when you detox. We think, oh, we can just do a detox whenever we want to. Not so much. So it's helpful to do that. And then I run a Facebook group that's free, and it's called Heartfelt Yoga and Ayurveda with Hannah. And I teach yoga there. There's over 500 classes available. And then I also teach about Ayurveda and also interview lovely people like you, Kate, there. And so that's also available. And you can find all of these things at my website, which is heartfeltwellbeing.com. Heartfeltwellbeing.com. And yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in learning more and living into your dharma and your full potential.
I just love this so much. Thank you for sharing this with our audience and our community. And maybe we'll talk again.
Excellent. Thanks for the opportunity.